On your Thursday episode of Locked On Raptors, I want everyone to take a deep breath in and out. There's no reason to stress about Toronto Raptors game results anymore.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Thursday, March the 27th, and I am your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can also find the show on Instagram, and you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server, link in the description of the podcast, free to join. As always, you can also support the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter. If you're watching on YouTube, QR code on the screen for you to click on through, drop your email in the box. You can also do so by going to the link in the description of the podcast if you're listening on audio. And it's 100% free to get original blogs from me 5 days a week, baby. I wrote about a fun draft prospect yesterday if you want to go check that out. Again, you get it to your inbox for free. 5 days a week. Katie Heindel, League at Large, Michael Shearer, Basketball Poetry, Josh Lloyd, Fantasy Tips, links to all the great coverage of the NBA around the world. Go do it, please. All right. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And we are off and running here talking about a Toronto Raptors 116-86 win over the very stinky Brooklyn Nets in a game that had a lot of tank implications. But now that it's done, with the Raptors picking up the victory, I think it's time for everyone to just kind of relax. I think it's pretty clear. The Raptors are going to be 7th in the NBA draft lottery in May, and that's just the way it is. The win over the Nets last night puts a 3-game gap between Toronto and the Sixers and the Nets for 5 and 6. There's a 5-game gap between the Raptors at 7 and the Heat and Spurs tied with 31 wins at 8 and 9. They're a little marooned right now, and I think that's a good thing. We will get into why. It's a very refreshing, relieving time around the Toronto Raptors after the win last night. We will get into the rookies and their performances against Brooklyn. Still the thing to watch with this team, and we got the good, the bad, and the coming up later on. But yeah, let's get into it. Your Toronto Raptors are almost assured to be number 7 in the draft lottery order when it all is said and done. As of right now, per Basketball Reference, Toronto has a 92.2% chance of finishing 7th in the lottery. It's a 5.8% chance of climbing up to 6th, and only a 1.1% chance of sliding down to number 8, and a 0.1% chance of making it all the way to 9. They're going to be most likely, very, very, very likely 7th in the lottery. And like I said, I think this is a time to just sort of let it all go. This has been a stressful little stretch here for anyone keeping an eye on the tank standings who's worried about where the Raptors are going to end up. Now it's basically been decided with this game against the Nets last night, and you can kind of just stop sweating the results the rest of the way. Stop worrying about who's playing and who's not, and oh no, is Scotty playing too many minutes? Oh no, is Quickly and Pirtle, are they doing too good a job of winning minutes when they're on the floor? It doesn't really matter anymore. The Raptors could go 6-3 to close the season, and it's still wildly unlikely they're going to fall any further than they are currently in the lottery. They could also lose every game the rest of the way and still probably not have the juice to catch the Nets and the Sixers, who are both terrible. This is where they'll be. They'll have a 7.5% chance at the number 1 pick. They'll have a 31.9% chance of picking in the top 4. They'll have about a 20% chance to stay at number 7 and a 33% chance to fall to number 8. And that is all right. And this is going to sound like copium. I know this is going to sound like copium, but for those who are especially peeved that the Raptors, quote unquote, wasted an 8-31 start and are not 4th, 5th, 6th in the lottery standings, I think this draft gives a little bit of license and leeway to feel all right about not quite picking at the top of the crop. Obviously, you would love to get Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper. Guess what? Finishing 1 or 2 doesn't guarantee you anything. In fact, it most likely means you're going to not be 1 or 2 on draft night when it all is said and done. That's just the way the flattened lottery works. The Utah Jazz right now, for all the losing they've done, if you want one of the 2 guys who are kind of branded franchise changers in this draft, Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, being where the Utah Jazz are is not a way to ensure that at all. They have a 14% chance at number 1, 13.5% chance at number 2, and they're far more likely to fall to 3 or below. That's just the way it goes in the flat lottery world. And the Raptors, we know, very recently, 4 years ago, 2021, the Raptors were 7th in the draft lottery after the Tampa Tank season, moved up to number 4. We've seen this. The Hawks moved up from, I believe, 9th or 10th last year. The flattened lottery world has changed the dynamics here. And when you look at the guys on the board in the draft, I've done quite a bit of coverage on the sort of top 10 to 12 guys in this draft. I think you're looking at wherever the Raptors pick, be it 7th or 8th, if that's the sort of worst case outcomes, if they end up in one of those two spots, you can all but guarantee that one of a bunch of really interesting prospects is going to be on the board. Just mathematically speaking, assuming Flag goes 1, Harper goes 2. You've got VJ Edgecombe, Ace Bailey, Kaman Malawash, Derek Queen, Jeremiah Fears, who we're going to talk about on an episode probably next week. I think he rules. And Trey Johnson, kind of the next crop of dudes in the draft from 3 through 8. One of those guys is guaranteed because of math to be on the board when the Raptors pick. That's great. Whoever they take there will instantly walk in the door as their best prospect, and I look forward to seeing them integrated into the team next season. There's also a couple other guys who could, be in that mix for the Raptors too that aren't quite sort of as consensus top 10 dudes as maybe, some of these other guys are. Noa Essengue, I talked about yesterday in the newsletter. We'll talk about him probably a little bit later on too in this show. Like, very interesting, like extremely Raptors coded prospect. He could be the guy there for the Raptors. They're going to have options. This is a draft that while after the top 2, there's no surefire guy who's going to be a franchise altering piece for you. That was never a likely outcome anyway. You're probably going to end up with a good player here who, again, with the Raptors development magic and just being in the system as the best prospect on the team, is going to have a lot of runway to succeed and hit those high-end developmental outcomes. Feels pretty good. Again, it just kind of gives you license to breathe, that win last night over the Nets, right? You don't have to go into every single game stressing about, oh God, what will a win here mean for their overall standing? 7th is where they're going to be, and that's okay. I also think, does this open up the Raptors to experiment a little bit with Brandon Ingram, right? Does it give them the leeway here to, they're still not going to report on his status again for another 4 or 5 days. We'll see it, probably middle of next week. We'll get an idea of, okay, what's next here for Brandon Ingram. Middle of next week, you're already into April. And so the time is ticking real quick here, but say they're able to get him in for 4 or 5 games to close the season. Maybe the announcement next week is that, hey, he's been ramped up, he's ready to go, he's playing tomorrow or whatever it might be. Maybe there's a way here that you can just kind of give yourself license to play everybody over the last 5 games. And it becomes like this nice little post-credit scene on a season upon which the book has already been written. But, you got the last 5 games of, ooh, look at this. This is a little preview of next year, the next Avengers movie. You got this coming up, baby. That's very possible. I think now that the Raptors don't need to sweat over every single result, I think it opens up some possibilities to actually see some fun, interesting stuff. Now, will you learn anything from 5 games of Brandon Ingram playing with the rest of the main guys on this team over the final few games against bad opponents? Not really, but it's, as far as just like entertainment value, getting to watch some guys play basketball together for the first time, get a little glimpse of what the fit might look like and what might need to be massaged over the course of the summer. I think it's worth it. Again, 4 or 5 games, it's not much, especially considering the teams they play are all terrible. But, if you can get them in for that Pistons game, April 4th, like maybe that's useful. Again, it's March and April basketball. None of this means much of anything. You're not pulling grand conclusions, but having a teensy little bit of tape of those 5 guys, your Barrett, Ingram, Barnes, Quickly, Pirtle group, if you can get them on the floor together for a handful of games, that's better than zero information, which is what you currently have right now. So yeah, I think it opens up that possibility for a bit of a fun exclamation point in the season. That won't mean anything. It won't change their standing. It won't move them from 7th to 5th or 6th or 8th or 9th. It'll just be a thing where they can kind of, free of the burden of worrying about the implications of every single result, just get to see their guys play. I'm open and relishing that concept. We're going to talk a lot about draft guys coming up in the weeks to come. Obviously, we're going to really ramp up our draft coverage once the season wraps. But I got to say, man, I'm quite enthused and intrigued by a lot of the dudes who are going to be in the range for the Raptors, assuming they pick 7th or 8th, let alone if they move up, obviously. 1 or 2, still a dream, baby. 7.5% chance at number 1, but 8% chance at number 2. It's still on the board. It's still a thing that can happen, especially considering we're talking about a lottery, which is a one-off instance of a thing that is entirely random, unpredictable. It is one data point of, thousands and millions of possible data points anytime the lottery is drawn. Anything can happen, baby. That's the promise of flattened odds. It's why it's kind of ruined the league. And a bunch of teams have said, yeah, we don't need to make the play-in. We're just going to go get in that lottery mix because, hey, anything can happen. It's true. Anything can happen. We're going to come back on the other side. We're going to get into the rookie report, baby. Dig into Jacoby Walter, Jamison Battle, Jonathan Mogbo, who maybe had his best game as a pro, and Jamal Shead. We will get into that coming up as we continue the show. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can bet get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Maybe you're really invested in this Duke team with Kaman Malawash and Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple, a bunch of potential future Toronto Raptors. You want to see them go far. Maybe you hate Duke and want to bet against them and get some money if they lose. That's fun too. You can do all of that over at FanDuel with their very easy to use app. FanDuel, very easy to use. For me, I'm not someone who bets very much. When I get in, I'm not like a fish out of water. I could easily navigate, find the stuff I want to go throw some money down on. And you get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get it on the college hoops action all tournament long. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Back at it here on your, what the hell day is it? Thursday episode of Locked On Raptors, recapping a tank battle loss, I suppose, for the Toronto Raptors, if you want to look at it that way. They win comfortably, and so the tank has sputtered out just a little bit here at the 7th spot in the lottery. Another thing that can kind of, warm you at night as you think about all of the high draft position that could have been, still might be, but could have been far more, likely on the range of outcomes, is the fact that, the Raptors have some pretty damn good rookies, and it might be a big reason why they've been unable to lose all of these games. Of course, the Raptors have played some of their main guys, 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it might be in these nights. But they're also running out a whole lot of rookie minutes. And usually that's a formula for losing. When your rookie guys are just better than the sort of bench scrubs that the Nets are throwing out or the Wizards are throwing out, that is kind of one of them good problems. It doesn't, again, mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things because March basketball is fake as it gets, but there's something to be taken from the Raptors being unable to lose to all of these teams, largely because, and not only because they're playing their stars too, but largely because their rookies are just too damn competent. The rookies, by the way, that they drafted, with the 19th pick in later in the 2024 draft, they've built themselves some really interesting functional depth going forward. Let's rattle through each of the guys and sort of a pull-away takeaway from the 4 main dudes on the rookie class from the Raptors. Jacoby Walter, last night, poor shooting. That's going to be a thing. Like, the efficiency is going to have to come around for him to really stick. But a lot of the other stuff, the in-between stuff, the connective stuff, the defense, there's a lot to really like here with Jacoby Walter. And I think the thing that popped off the screen last night against the Nets, he was slinging some pretty sweet dimes. He had 6 assists in this game. And a lot of them I would classify, 5 of the 6, I think, going back and watching them, I think I'd classify 5 of his 6 as creative assists. There's one where he kind of dumped it off to Scotty Barnes in close quarters. Maybe not the most creative pass in the world, though a smart connective pass, surely. And I love passing on the interior, one of my favorite things in the world. But when it comes to the other assists he had in this game, he splits a double, hits Orlando Robinson on the roll. Later, he drives and kicks to the weak corner, the weak 45 with Jamal Shead there for a catch and shoot 3. Drive and live dribble kick to Orlando Robinson for a 3 in the second half. Transition little touch pass to RJ Barrett. That was a beauty. The long outlet to him, and he just kind of whoops it right over to RJ for a dunk. And then had another pick and roll pass to Robinson as well. I think there's some version of Jacoby Walter in the future that's running second units for you because he's got that handle, he's got the passing vision, he's got some pull-up juice. Obviously, the percentage has got to come up, but the mid-range pull-up stuff has been very interesting from him this season. there's a guy here who can, in theory, run a second unit for you. And I think, sort of scaling it up to starter level, I think there's a chance that Ja'Kobe Walter is just like a really nice connective fifth starter when things all sort of come into shape for him over the years, right? Like a guy who brings defensive juice, really great, fast defensive feet, can stay in front of his guy, is annoying, has good arms, long hands, things like that. Long hands? Does he have long hands? Long arms, good hands. That's what I was trying to say. And then he does the connective stuff on offense, the secondary creation, can attack a closeout. Obviously the catch and shoot three's got to come along, but those have been much better over the course of the last 50 or so games compared to how he started. It's a lot to get excited about with Ja'Kobe Walter. And I think that passing stuff last night was some of the glimpse of what he can look like on this team going forward and sort of the various roles he might be able to occupy. Jamison Battle in this one, 8 points, 10 rebounds, 2 of 3 from downtown. Just a really nice agent of spacing and shooting. And if he's able to chip in any other parts of the game, 10 rebounds, like that's huge. He's just got such a clear path to being like a niche rotation player at the very least, a specialist, a guy who you feel all right being on the floor because of what he brings in terms of space and just sort of helping the court geometry when he's on offense. If he's doing little things like grabbing 10 rebounds or having moments where he can be a strong point of attack defender on wings, like that's a guy who's going to play minutes for you. I don't necessarily know if he's like a long-term starter or anything like that. Probably not, but like nice bench rotation piece who you're happy to throw in, who can be a spot starter for you just as an agent of spacing. I think, a lot to like with Jamison Battle, but a nice little run here for him. Jamal Shead, I mean, we talked a lot about Jamal Shead lately. He's been super fun. His playmaking, his court management really stands out against these opponents that the Raptors keep on coming up against. 8 assists for him in this one to 1 turnover, 3 steals. Kind of the Jamal Shead experience. He didn't hit much of it in regards to his twos. Pretty bad shooting from 2 in this game. I think he was over 3, but 2-5 from downtown. Hit a couple catch and shoot threes. Just a really solid backup point guard in the making, and I look forward to him eating up a lot of minutes for the Raptors next season as that second unit sort of manager, right? Like you're not going to ask him to go and score 25 a game for you or anything like that, but as a dude can come in and just kind of organize your second unit while also offering, increasingly solid point of attack defense. There's a lot to love with Jamal Shead, on top of him just being just like a genuinely extremely likable guy, very easy dude to root for. And then we get Jonathan Mogbo. Maybe his best game yet as a Raptor. Certainly stuffed the stat sheet. 16 points, 7 boards, 5 assists, a steal and a block in 24 minutes. You love to see that. Offensively, he subsists a lot on garbage buckets, right? Offensive putbacks, little pick and roll dunk, dump offs and things like that where he goes up and dunks. Hey, all that stuff is valuable. He's not going to go and necessarily create his own shot very much. And obviously the touch around the rim has been a little suspect, though last night, a couple little interesting flashes. Has this nice little turnaround baby hook. That looked pretty good, dead on. A couple possessions later, he sort of spins and finishes with the left on a little push shot in close. That's the type of stuff that over the course of the summer, if Jonathan Mogbo can figure out that sort of 10 feet and in push shot, which has been a real struggle for him this year, no doubt about it. But you stick him in the lab, you stick him in the player development hopper, and you just kind of work on that thing. There's a lot of utility for a guy like Jonathan Mogbo, whose defense is undeniable. He's enormous. His feet are like magical the way he moves in space. The arms go for days. Like the instincts, especially in on-ball defense, are really, really great. Doesn't get shaken off his feet. Forces a lot of really tough shots when he's guarding guys face up. The offense is going to have to be there for him to be a viable NBA player, right? This is the Matisse Thybulle thing where if you can't contribute on offense enough, then Jonathan Isaac is kind of an example of this too. Jonathan Isaac was great last season when his offense was kicking. This year, he's been terrible on offense, and the defense just kind of doesn't really have as much effect because he drags down the other end of the floor so badly. You don't want Jonathan Mogbo to fall into that bucket of guys for sure. And I do think the passing, we saw the passing in this game, 5 assists, a couple like really beautiful feeds from the high elbow where the Raptors love to run a lot of stuff through their bigs. I like that they're using Mogbo in those packages, the ones that they'll kind of use Jakob Poeltl in, for example. It's a way for them to create space. Like they just bring their big all the way out. And because there's so much passing going off of that, teams can't like totally hang back and give them like, Yak or Mogbo like 8 feet of space because it's just going to give them a free kind of view of what's going on. You got to kind of get up in them and obstruct those passing lanes a little bit. And it creates and sort of manufactures space that wouldn't otherwise be there. The 3-point shot obviously is going to have to come along too. But when you look at these 4 guys, Mogbo, Shead, Battle, Walter, I think you go into next season, and it's not like the Raptors are counting on any of these guys to come in and start. They're not asking any of these guys to be like high usage 6-man types or anything like that. Maybe a guy like Walter becomes that by the end of next year. We'll see. But you're looking at a team that, we've talked about the main 5 guys, and you've got Grady Dick, Ochai Agbaji as sort of the more established second unit guys. If you're 8 through 11 in your rotation is this collection of rookies, plus you have your own high pick coming in, whoever it might be, and as I talked about before, it's going to be someone pretty talented, their best prospect in the door. All of a sudden, you're looking at a lot of dudes on pretty cheap contracts who are in the midst of their development curves. We'll see where they go. It's not always linear for sure, but I feel good betting on at least a handful of these guys to continue to kind of cement themselves as at least rotation players. And all of a sudden, you're looking at a team with like 12 players that you're like, oh, okay, I'm happy with that guy being on the floor. I'd like that guy on the floor. I like that guy's fit with that guy. It's just an effective formula for playing winning regular season basketball. It insulates you against injury. It gives you multiplicitous lineups you can toss out. It just helps you navigate 82 games and probably pick up a lot of wins along the way. And this quartet of rookies from this draft is going to make that possible next year. It's very exciting. Again, it's the Nets. It doesn't really matter. The individual success in this game is not what I'm looking at here. You just kind of take what they did and then use it for larger scale, sort of big picture conversations. But I don't understand how you could not be thrilled about what the depth of this team is shaping up to look like. Not even just next year, but imagine 2-3 years from now when these guys are still on rookie deals, still, very, kind of early in their development curves. And again, none of them have star upside necessarily. Maybe there's something there with Walter if things really hit at like the 100th percentile outcome for him. But you're looking at good, effective NBA players, and there's a lot of power in just having a lot of pretty good players on your team. 4 dudes from one draft class where it was a bad draft class and you didn't have a lottery pick is some masterful vintage work by this front office. And I think it's all right to be pretty excited about where these 4 guys can go in terms of, bolstering the second unit or bolstering the Raptors trade equity and things they might be able to go and do, sort of sweetening the pot with some of these guys. It's just, they did this before with the shadow core they built with DeLon Wright and Jakob Poeltl, Pascal Siakam, obviously, Van Vliet, Powell, OG. Like, you bring up these young guys and some of them might get moved. Some of them become part of your team. All of it's good and all of it's, really, really encouraging development from this season. We're going to come back on the other side, round things out, that is, by rattling off the good, the bad, and the from last night's game. We'll do that coming up in just 1 second. Wrapping it up here on your Thursday edition of Locked On Raptors with the good, the bad, and the It's the way we round out every single episode of this here podcast on the heels of a Toronto Raptors basketball game. A thing I liked, a thing I didn't like, things got me a little bit intrigued from the latest in Toronto Raptors hoops. And the good, we should give it to Orlando Robinson, who I gave a hard time on Tuesday's podcast after the game against the Wizards, where he was very not good. And he was really nice in this game. 23 points, 12 rebounds, like a 20-10 double-double. You love that. He only did it in 24 minutes. He was 10 of 14. Caught a rhythm, as he said after the game in the post-game interview with RJ Barrett. By the way, really good stuff from RJ Barrett, taking the mic from our girl Kayla Gray for a couple questions. And then Kayla, I think smartly saying, get the hell out of here now, RJ, and finishing the interview. Great stuff. We love good TV. Shout out Orlando Robinson. I don't think he's a long-term piece for this team, but always nice to see a dude have himself a night. A bonus good. I mentioned Ochai Agbaji briefly the last segment. Ochai Agbaji continues to just be rock steady, man. 5 of 8 from the field in this one, 2 of 5 from downtown, 12 points, 8 boards, 2 assists, plus 13. He's just a really nice player to have around. And look, he got forgotten a little bit in the projection of next year's team because it's a lot about the young guys and Brandon Ingram and how the fit of the main starters is going to look like. Where does Ochai fit into all of it? But he's having himself just like a really so consistent season. It's so impressive. And to have him as your 7th or 8th guy going to next season, I think you're absolutely thrilled. It might be that he becomes a casualty of the luxury tax at some point, maybe as early as this summer if things, kind of go certain ways with the lottery and things like that. It's not a guarantee he's going to be around for the long haul. just because the way the financial situation in the NBA works. It sucks. I wish everybody could be on the team for the long haul, but it's just not how it's going to work. But yeah, I think just having a guy who's still quietly moseying along, hitting 40% of his threes, making most of his twos, playing above average, not incredible, but above average defense in the wings, able to kind of slide between the 1, 2, and 3 defensively. It's just a nice dude to have around. A lot of teams could use a guy like Ochai Agbaji, and for him to just be there as your 7th or 8th guy next year who can spot start for you, I think you're in awesome shape. And it's, again, one of the great stories of this season is Ochai Agbaji just kind of revealing himself as just like a super effective, competent rotation basketball player. The bad for me, this isn't anything tied to the Toronto Raptors because there's nothing really bad about what the Raptors did last night. For me, the bad is that the Iron Eagle Sarah Kustok Nets broadcast team has to call games for this Brooklyn Nets team. They stink, and they're one of the very best broadcast teams doing it. They're so good when they call high leverage games. It's awesome. I loved tuning into Nets games when Kevin Durant and Kyrie and James Harden were on the Nets because that broadcast team just brings so much to the table. Sometimes you tune into a game, you just got to hope the play-by-play team it's like in hockey, like a stay-at-home defenseman. If you just never notice them, it's great. That's kind of the bar I have sometimes with broadcast teams. There's obviously ways to notice them really in like positive ways. I think the Raptors broadcast honestly brings that. Yeah, they're maybe a little bit homer pilled, but that's fine. Everyone's a little homer pilled. But like Jack Armstrong is such a personality that it's just like, okay, this is great. This is adding to the table, making this a more enjoyable experience to watch. A lot of the broadcasts out there are negative experiences, not super fun, not super engaging, not like telling you a whole lot of interesting stuff. Iron Eagle, Sarah Kustok are the absolute best. They're so good, and I wish they were not having to pretend that Keon Johnson isn't one of the worst players in the NBA. But that's where we are. Hopefully the Nets can kind of come around a little bit. It's fun when the Nets are at least decent. I've always kind of seen Toronto, Brooklyn as like sort of one of the Raptors' closest rivalries. It'd be nice if there was something there. But if nothing else, I just want to have Iron Eagle and Sarah Kustok calling interesting high leverage basketball games and not late March Nets 30-point routes. To close things out, also not at all tied to this basketball game. If you can't tell, not so interested in the nuts and bolts of this 30-point win over the tanking Brooklyn Nets. Apologies for those who came for deep tactical breakdowns. But for me, talked about this prospect yesterday in the newsletter, and I thought I'd devote the to him today. Haven't talked about him much on the show just yet, but if you haven't checked out the work of Noa Essengue, who's an 18-year-old, 6'10 French forward, plays for Ratio Farm. Ratio Farm sounds like me doing posts on the internet. They've been kind of a pipeline of guys in recent years of Euro prospects, and Noa Essengue, to me, is just so Raptors coded, man. I shared a clip or a video of one of his highlight clips from the season in the newsletter. If you want to go click through, it's from No Ceilings, our pals over there. And just like watching him play, you can see exactly, like I can envision Masai Ujiri scouting a game in Germany, watching Noa Essengue just like smacking his lips, rubbing his hands together, like, let's go, because he's just so much in line with the type of dude that Masai Ujiri has been kind of addicted to drafting during his 12 plus year long Captain Ahab like obsession with getting his white whale, which was of course Giannis back in 2013 when he tried to trade into the draft to take him, couldn't get in there, and we know how that all went. Bruno Caboclo, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, OG Anunoby, these have all been attempts to go and get that Giannis that Masai was promised. And I'm not saying Noa Essengue is going to be Giannis. He almost certainly will not be. But he's 6'10". He's very fluid. He's like a really fun athlete. He's kind of got this throwback style of play. Just very bouncy, cool cadence to how he moves. A lot of funk going on there. Finishes well around the rim. 3-point shot, as you might expect from a raw wing prospect. Not quite where you want it to be, just 25% over the course of 41 games in all competitions with Ratio Farm Ulm this season. I think they just call them Ulm, but it's fun to say Ratio Farm. It's a fun word. Either way, Noa Essengue feels like he was designed in a lab to be a dude that Masai Ujiri wants in the draft. Would not be a shock at all if he ends up being the pick for the Raptors at 7 or 8. And hey, man, yet another cool 6'10 wing prospect to the team. I'm never going to complain as someone who loves cool 6'10 wing prospects with, suspect shooting touch. It's just kind of a thing for me. Either way, keep an eye out on Noa Essengue. We'll talk more about him. Obviously, there's still time left in his season over in Germany. He'll be part of the combine, one would assume. Once that season wraps up, the combine's in Chicago from May 11th to 18th, right around the time of the draft lottery. So we'll get all the little more sort of a clear picture over the next 6 weeks or so of where the Raptors will be, what kind of guys are going to be vying for the spots the Raptors are going to be picking around, all of that. Looking forward to all that. And yeah, so on this day where you might be feeling blue because the Raptors have ruined their shot of having a top 6 spot in the draft lottery by beating the stupid Nets. Rest easy. There are lots of cool, interesting players where the Raptors are most likely to be picking. Maybe they don't get their pick of the bunch because they're not super high in the order, but someone's going to fall. Someone will be there. And I think a few of these guys have like legit star upside as well. I'm really excited to talk about Jeremiah Fears, who I'm super duper into. We're going to talk about him on a show probably next week. Either way, thank you so much for hanging out. We will talk to you again on Friday, another episode of Locked On Raptors. Katie Heindl is going to be along. We'll do some Toxic Positivity Friday to send you off into the weekend. Till then, though, please follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. QR code on the screen for the newsletter. Link in the description of the podcast for the newsletter, as well as the Discord if you want to become part of our listener family over there. And we will see you on Friday. Thanks so much for hanging. Bye-bye. I got to hit this shot. It's been far too long. Here we go. Oh, my God. So bad.